Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? We're about to get the webinar started, so get settled in. It's 12 o'clock on the Eastern time zone, so grab your lunch, get prepared. We're going to be talking about a really cool project that we embarked on this summer for all of you CRPs with Chapter 990s. So let's, as everyone's still filing in here, if you can head to the Q&A box and just let me know if you can hear me. So just type a Y for yes and for no, and can you see the screen right now? Well, hello, Jill. It is good to see you. So go ahead in there. Antonio, good to see you. Everyone else, go ahead in there, type Y for yes if you can hear me, and also if you can see the screen. Got a lot of great people here today. Luis, good to see you. Hello, Christy. Hi, Barbara. A lot of familiar names. Great. Everyone can it looks like all the tech is working. Awesome. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. So today's webinar is about the buried truth in your Chapter 990s and how you can access it. My name is Kyle Bazzi. I am the Director of Growth at a company called Bill Highway in my favorite city in the world, Detroit. And so today's webinar is really interesting. So over the past year, we've been investing a lot into education. And if you haven't been on one of our webinars before, one thing I will let you know right off the front is you will not be sold anything from us, okay? So this is purely educational. It is all about you today. And today's webinar is actually a special one for us because it's a project we've been working on this summer based on the feedback that you all have given us over the last 12 months. And it's around just the collection of 990s and something that a lot of you do annually, okay? So this actually came out from one of our roundtables that we did in DC where we got some feedback on just a challenge that you all are going through. And if you're not familiar when I say CRP, what I mean by that is component relations professionals. So those of you in the association world that are working directly with chapters up there at National or HQ. We just found this gap in education that exists. Like we're going to annual in Toronto this week, and there's one session the whole week on chapters. So what we did was we came together and just started creating really great content. Well, it has become really great content, hopefully, for all of you. So this is all about you, okay? So please dive in. We're excited to get some feedback for what we created for you, okay? So first, before I jump into the 990 project, and I'm going to show it off and kind of show you guys what it does, I'd love to get a little bit of feedback from y'all. So first question I have is, currently today, do you collect Chapter 990 information? Okay, so maybe it's an annual ordeal where your chapters or your state affiliates or your components, whatever you call them, there's a process that you go about actually collecting the 990 information that they filed with the IRS. So obviously their tax information. Is this something you collect on a regular basis? Obviously once a year being probably the most common. Okay, we got a lot of yeses here. So the second question is, how do you collect the information? In this one, I want to just sit on for a second because I really want to learn, how do you go about it? Are they sending you just an email with it? Are you hounding them? Do you get 100% collection? Do you incentivize the collection? Kind of walk me through how you go about that today. I would love to learn that. And so as I'm reading some of those, the third question is equally as important. How do you use the information? Is this something that you have just always done, and that's what you did when you kind of took this over? Is this something that your finance team or CFO says we need because we're at risk if we don't know this information? Or maybe they say the opposite. I've heard some CFOs that didn't want to see it. Kind of walk me through how do you use the information? Okay. So a lot of self-reporting. Some people are saying they just ask if the 990s were filed. Thank you, Barbara. Christy said chapter self-report. Thank you. Jennifer requests the chapter to confirmation of filing. No, we don't get 100%. We try to look at IRS website to get additional information. Jennifer, you're going to be very happy with what we created today. Okay, awesome. I can't read through all these, but it looks like that is the second question. So the third question, so Chrissy actually takes it to calculate their charter fee that the chapters pay them. Jill said finance says we need info to reconfirm 501c3. Louise said just for compliance. Awesome. Okay, great stuff, guys. Thank you very much. So and I saw a couple of you guys say this too. What we've been finding is there is a growing trend of either on the one side of the spectrum, just gross mismanagement of financial funds, which I'm sure a lot of you are saying, yeah, I can see that. And then on the other end of the spectrum is fraud and embezzlement in kind of fill in the blank with the things that you don't want to appear in the news with your association's name on it, regardless if it's of a chapter and they are completely separately filed, okay? So at the roundtables, we started learning a lot of this feedback and learned your guys' process. And I think it was Barbara that said, you'll actually try to go to the IRS website to see did they file, because obviously, you have to file, and if you're not within good standing within 3 years, you can lose your tax exempt status as a chapter. So one of the things we embarked upon as we talk about why we would collect the 90s is we tried to figure out, and we asked ourselves a question, and actually my product intern from Build Highways on this webinar here, Naven, and Naven's from the University of Michigan, and we asked Naven to come in and work on a project with us to make this easier for you guys. Okay, so that's what we're going to be going over today. So just for a lot of you that might ask, why else would HQ collect 990s from chapters? We heard a lot of these answers in the questions here. So compliance, commitment to competence, risk identification. We met an association that actually gave us this idea at the roundtable, and they talked about how every year the CRP and the Director of Finance actually go through the 990s. And this particular association had over 100 chapters, and they'll actually find discrepancies in numbers. They found actually one of the executive directors was illegally embezzling funds because they saw that the chapter was growing and their salary was decreasing, and they actually caught one of their chapters in the act. So risk identification is a really interesting one that we're excited to explore even further after this to help you guys kind of score the financial data from your chapters. Identify financial risk, integrity and ethical values. Obviously, we talked about the tax exempt status, and then member trust, right? So, HQ can help kind of make sure that you're not liable for something going wrong, and whether or not you're legally liable in the eye of the member or public relations, you're going to be guilty by association regardless, right? So these are some of the feedback we've got from why the National Association or HQ is collecting 990s from chapters. So here's what we did to help. So the IRS and Amazon Web Services, we found out, I think it was back in 2013, they actually teamed up. And the IRS took all of this raw data and put it onto the Amazon Web Services. And what this means is they made it very easy for computer programmers to pull the data if you had a unique identifier. So that unique identifier is going to be the EIN, or the employer identification number. So real quick, and we've surveyed on this, how many of you have the EINs of your chapters? I would love to know if anyone doesn't have those, because typically we find most of the CRPs we talk to, they have the EINs, and they don't change typically, right? So it's a good identifier, because sometimes searching the IRS database for the chapter name comes with mixed results. Okay, cool. So it looks like we got across the board. Oh, hello, Patrick. Across the board, everyone's got the EINs. So we have a link here if you're, geeky like myself and Naven and want to look at that more. We'll drop the AWS, Amazon Web Services, and IRS link into the chat just so you can check it out. but pretty much it's just detailing that now all of this 990 information, not only is it publicly available, they've made it really easy to pull from the database. Okay, so I'm gonna pop over to something real quick. So here's what we did. We identified that this is often a time-consuming task for you all, and again, at best, you're not, you're getting maybe 90% of the chapters to report. So this is just an example Excel spreadsheet. And what was someone that is one of those guys that when he talks, it seems like a different language, but he seems to know what he's talking about. He went through and found a way to write a program where if you give us your EINs, we can actually pull back all of the historical data that the IRS has made public. I believe it's from 2011 or 2013. But regardless, it can show you when all that's in there. So for this example, you can see we just put some dummy chapters in here. And this was for the tax year 2017, which obviously is not over yet, but again, it's just an example. And what we did was we created a starter summary tab. And so you can see and kind of compare total revenues, maybe if they listed out salaries or comp, expenses, assets, so on and so forth. And then this is broken down by the chapter. But then you can also, he wrote a little bit more of the program where you can drill down into each individual chapter. Now these numbers down here are actually their EINs. So we've redid the Excel spreadsheet so it actually showed the chapter name down here. And you can see their actual tax filing automatically pulled in here for you. Okay, so it could be, let's say, the end of April or the end of May next year, when a lot of them have filed and the IRS makes them public. And this can automatically be pulled into an Excel spreadsheet for you, rather than you having to go out to each and every one of them. So you can identify, did they file? And then beyond did they file, you can see the data that was included in the actual 990. Okay, now there's, I'm sure you're aware if you're pulling this data already, if a chapter is making less than $50,000 a year or reporting $50,000 a year, they file something called a 990 postcard. And in the 990 postcard, it's very limited in the data it shows. It just shows, yes, they filed and they're making less than 50 grand in their address. So you're not going to get all of the data here, but you will get the confirmation that that chapter actually filed, okay? Now, a couple of interesting things that we started looking through with associations that turned us onto this project. So the reason that we created a summary tab that doesn't have all the fields, just to note, is because not every chapter that files exactly the same way. And so sometimes the fields they use aren't the fields that other chapters use. So they don't match up perfectly. So what we did, and we'd love to get feedback, is what are the fields that you want on the summary tab? This is just an example. What we're looking to do today and in kind of beyond today is get that feedback so we can build a better summary tab for you. Because what we would love to do is just automatically give you this data when something's filed, so you guys aren't chasing those chapters down anymore. So jumping back into the actual a file of a chapter here, what's really cool is you can, first and foremost, you can see all of the officers that they name on their board or working at the actual chapter if they have staff. So all of those officers are actually listed here, and you can track, because I know a lot of you said, we're just trying to figure out who's still on the board or who's not on the board anymore. So a lot of times all of that is listed inside their tax filing. Now to go a step further, a couple of other things, and I'm going to go over this when we get back to the presentation, but you can see, did they have a third-party auditor or CPA firm file the taxes for them, right? So that's another, associations have been telling us, that's another kind of gut check or eye check of, how much can we trust even the numbers that they reported to the IRS. And you can see what that tax firm is on here as well. So there's some really cool little nuggets here that we've been learning from other associations that have components, how they're actually using the data as well. So you can see here, HBL CPAs actually filed this example tax form here. So it's kind of cool. Again, we can pull this data back, I think, until 2011, or when the IRS has put it public. Okay, so there are a lot of fields here. Not every chapter is going to be filling them out, but we would love to hear from you all. As you're putting some thought to this, what does that look like for you on that summary tab, if that's something you want? And a lot of times you're going to be asking your director of finance or your CFO those questions. But yeah, we'd love to learn that, because this is something, just to be clear, we're going to be doing for free for all of you CRPs, okay? And eventually we'd love to just get it onto our billhighway.co site so you can log in and do it yourself. Right now, it's you send us your EINs and we send you back this Excel spreadsheet, okay? Awesome. So again, told us about, and we thought could solve some problems for you from what we've been hearing. So I'm going to go and jump back over to the presentation. So let me know if you have any questions on that. And moreover, I'd love to hear from you. Would this be helpful, and is this something you guys are interested in? So again, this is just kind of the screenshot from the Excel spreadsheet. So obviously we're recording this webinar that will be sent out. The other thing we want to talk to you guys about is, and again, if you want to give us your feedback on this, when I talk to CRPs, you all fully understand and see the challenge around, or I should say the risk of fraud from your chapter leaders, especially the ones you don't hear from, the ones that are troublemakers, the ones that have an adverse relationship with HQ. And the one thing that we've been learning more and more is the finance department at National is starting to open up their thinking on what this actually means for the association, because it's becoming more and more prevalent, unfortunately, in the association world, because no one's monitored it for a long time. So we had some stats, and we're putting together some numbers on what is the potential risk, because typically that's how director of finances in CFO type roles, that's the language they speak, is how much liability or risk does this open up the association for. And so I don't know if anyone has any research that they've done or reports that have been passed around your association. We would really love to see those and learn from those. But this is just kind of something that we're kind of maintaining and keeping an eye on, as it's a growing topic of conversation in the association space. So tips on spotting fraud, and this is actually lessons learned or best practices that we learned from other associations in engaging with several of them while we created this 990 project. So the first and foremost, which almost all of you are already doing from the answers you gave me, is it's pretty simple. Have they reported? We talked to several associations that said it's amazing. The second one of our chapters, if they've been reporting consistently and on time for the past X amount of years, and then all of a sudden they stopped reporting or didn't report, and they're not getting in touch with us after we reach out, it's a huge red flag. And I think that one sounds obvious, but that really is the first and biggest one that we heard, like I said, that we heard from a lot of associations. And then when you ask questions about financials, do you get straightforward answers? And I kind of break this into two parts from what I heard from associations. One is, are they being combative and defensive? That's a huge red flag. Or is it just negligence or ignorance that they don't know and they don't have a CPA firm that's helping them do it? Because maybe it's not that they're doing it maliciously, but they could be filing incorrectly, which could come back to bite even just the chapter because of that. And then I heard a lot of CRPs that work with their finance departments that just look at the numbers and they call it spot checking. So there wasn't actual formulas that they created, or it wasn't that they were necessarily looking for a 6% decrease in something. It was just that this doesn't seem right. And sometimes you can't put your thumb exactly on it. But that was something that we learned was, why is this chapter, they've been growing so well for the past 5 years, all of a sudden just had a 20% decrease or something like that. So do the numbers just seem off? We talked a little bit about this one already. but does a third party complete its tax filings? That was increasingly important. So there's some kind of risk mitigation in having a third party do it. Now, sure, the third party could be a good friend of theirs and as a CPA, but at least you have another firm liable for the risk. When was the last time the chapter was audited? So especially if they're not using somebody to file their taxes, when was an audit? We've seen some associations that they don't have the resources or the capacity to do full financial audits on all their chapters every year, but they spot check them. So they'll actually go through a process where they'll work with their chapters on the financials, and they'll just kind of pick and choose each year which ones they're going to do it with. So that was another interesting one we learned from associations. Any others? Again, today's kind of more of a workshop learning lesson and showing off what we built. But if you guys have anything else that you use to spot fraud, what we're trying to do is just compile the best practices and condense those into one kind of unified piece of material that we can share with all the associations. So please let us know if there's anything else that you guys have found works really, really well. And Patrick said, in terms of fraud, is national spot checking for fraud with own chapters or federated chapters? That's a great question, Patrick. So it was actually federated chapters that they were working with. And one of the things that they did was create awards and financial incentives for those that were giving the financials to HQ. And a part of the process was, if you want to be included in that, was this, you agreed to get audited if HQ asked periodically. That was the way that the association handled it that we heard, but they were federated chapters. Okay, so how to prevent fraud? So we asked, what steps have been taken at the association, and we worked with probably eight or nine associations on this 990 project over the last 2 months. And we asked, what are you doing to prevent fraud? So one of the key topics was around the payments. So automating all donor and member payments. And what does that mean? Well, there's a way that we saw a lot of associations that we talked to try to consolidate the payment processing so that they had clear and consistent data in real time at HQ or visibility, rather than the kind of the opposite of what's going on right now, where everyone's on their own different systems. So there are some very jargon-heavy processes out there in the accounting world. But one of the other ways was to create control for checks and ACH payments as well. So not just credit card payments, but what is the process? Or in one of the associations told us in their affiliation agreement, they actually rolled out new language to talk about the financial controls that were expected from their chapters. And then establish rules for sharing and storing sensitive information. And this is a really big one, because we learned from these associations that a lot of their chapters were just grossly out of compliance, which was causing some issues with members. So, faxing credit card numbers or writing them down on pieces of paper and Post-it notes in the office. The one way that is, again, you might not be able to ensure this gets implemented, but establishing rules for sharing and storing information is definitely a step in the right direction for the prevention of fraud, or obviously even someone stealing financial information from your members. So what can you do with the data? And this is kind of the next part of our project that we're working on right now, is to take the data and actually create not even just a summary tab, but visual representations. And we're even working on what formulas can we write in Excel that, for instance, if I pop back over to the Excel spreadsheet, on this example, can we look at year-over-year growth for a 3-year period for each chapter? And we can start saying, like, here's your high-flying chapters, here's your steady growth chapters, here's your starting to get in trouble chapters, and here's the chapters that are just at the bottom of the barrel. So writing some simple stuff like that. We're also going to be exploring writing some some formulas in Excel to spot check, like that one association told us, they found the chapter with fraud where their chapter revenue was going up, but for some reason the executive director was taking less money. So can we write stuff to spot check that for each chapter for you, again, automatically? So a question I have for you right now, is there anything in the tax filings that you look for that maybe we could automate as well, especially if you have a lot of chapters? Is there anything like that that you can add to our pool of understanding so we can create in the next iteration of this? Would love to hear if anyone's got any ideas on that, and see some really good responses coming in. So that's one question we had today, because I think that would be really cool. So a couple of answers we got from the associations was, first was just demonstrating the results. If a lot of you in this webinar mentioned that your finance team is looking for the numbers. So visual representations on what to look for. We actually have a quote from Patrick coming up, but helping your chapters on how to use this data. The ones that aren't getting audited or using CPA firms, a lot of times it's not fraud, it's just they don't know better. So how can you use this as a tool to help educate your chapters? Create a benchmark report. So this is a great way to share growth information from what a high-flying chapter looks like versus the chapters that might need to concentrate or learn from the other chapters. So is there data that you can share to say, hey, here's how we did last year in terms of financials, and are you working with the chapters that are growing really, really quickly? So there was the association, the military officers, that they found their one chapter in Florida created this really unique member-to-member referral program, and they were growing like gangbusters. So that's the kind of stuff that you can surface from this and start to create community. I think that's the big part, is use it to create community amongst your chapters. And then obviously develop resources on what you learned. So what MOA did was they learned from this chapter in Florida and taught that program to other chapters across the country. I think that was like one of the best examples I saw of learning from the chapters that are being innovative. And then sure, you're not going to get every chapter to buy in, but you're going to be able to grow membership and increase engagement through these programs that typically or normally already exist at some of your high-flying chapters. And then obviously the data can be used in an illustration, kind of like we're showing here, where you can take the summary tab, and something again we're exploring is putting it into like a Tableau or another business intelligence tool to illustrate graphically what's going on. So it gives you what we call manage by exception. You don't have time to go through every 990. You don't have time to comb over every painstaking detail. So how can you create better tools to manage this information by exception? So you only need to maybe look at the chapters that have a yellow box or a red box, however you create it. Obviously, this is just an example, but that's another way that we're starting to see a lot of associations. There's a really big trend towards more of using data for insights, right? And so obviously collecting data is the first big challenge, but the data you do have, how can you start working on tools to help make you smarter and make better insights? So if you would like, and here is Patrick. So Patrick, who is at the Global Business Travel Association, we pulled a quote from him. It's not about pointing out faults or failures. It's about identifying areas of improvement in ways that we can work together so everyone is elevated in their performance. And if you're at an association right now that the chapters have been burned in the past, and you're walking into this role, and they kind of look at it, national HQ and say, we're not going to work with you, and got their pitchforks out, I would encourage you to talk to Patrick. He is a shining example of how he turned that around. And I've witnessed it firsthand that they look at Patrick as national now, or it's global, so HQ, and their relationship has completely shifted since he took that over. Now, I think Patrick had the benefit of being a chapter leader before, which I think is really important and gives him a lot of insights. But that is something that I think is super important and a really good example of that. So key takeaways, right, is understand, educate, and identify. This information, we've met some associations that are doing some really cool stuff with it and using it as a tool. We're hoping that the 990 project we did, and again, it's completely free for you guys to use. We just saw a problem and we had a really smart intern that was eager and excited to solve it for you guys. But how you use that is super important. And I think there's some associations that are kind of leading the way on that. So here is what we'll give you today. If you want, please email us, and you can just email myself or marketing@BillHighway or kbazzy@BillHighway. So we'll drop those into the chat box and send us a file of your EINs. And from that data, what we'll do is we'll send back that Excel spreadsheet for you. And if you have notes or ways that you would like to see the summary tab, put that in there for us as well, because we're still developing this to create it into something that is going to be extremely useful for you all. So again, we kind of view this as like version 1, and we'd love to see it evolve, eventually getting to the website where, our vision for this is, one day you guys could log in, all of your EINs are already uploaded, and you could set up email notifications to say, hey, on Friday, email me all of the new chapters that have submitted their tax filings to the government. So again, we're kind of toying around with some ideas, but again, we're going to base it off of you guys' feedback on what we build next. Okay. So lastly is, are you going to ASAE annual? How many of you are going to Toronto this weekend? We are hosting a happy hour with Mariner Management. So if you're familiar with Peter and Peggy, who are very awesome people, and trailblazers in themselves for chapters. We're throwing a happy hour just for people like you. So if you are interested in meeting other CRPs, if you want to bring your VPM membership by and you want them to see all the great stuff that's going on in the chapter association world, come by on August 13th from 5 to 7. It's the Azure restaurant and bar, which is actually located right in the same building as the conference is going to be held for ASAE Annual. And also, we are going to be at booth 550, so come by and see us. We have a caricature artist there who's just going to be doing that for our drawings for CRPs. We have a barista. We have some other really cool stuff at the booth. And again, it's just for chapters only. So we got this big blimp that says "Got Chapters," so you can't miss us. But we'd love to see you out at ASAE Annual. If we haven't met you in person, even if we have, come and get a coffee on us, or come see us at the happy hour, and just come meet each other. So again, we're not selling anything. This is just about you guys networking, getting to know each other. It's a small world of CRPs. There's about, I think about 1,000 of you all out there, but something that we're trying to work on building the community based on your guys' feedback. So that is going to conclude us for today, unless any of you have questions. Like I said, today was a little bit different than our typical one, just because we built a tool for you all. So feel free to email us with your EINs. If we don't hear from you on that, we hope to see you out at ASAE Annual. And until then, we will be sending out the next webinar, everything coming out soon too. So again, thanks so much, everyone. Hopefully this was helpful. We're really excited to kind of add more value for you guys going forward too. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.